and welcome. My name is Errity Green and this is Psychic True Crime. Today I am bringing you a reading on Amanda Knox. If you don't know Amanda Knox, if you don't know this story, if you aren't familiar with the Meredith Kercher murder and the heinous details of this crime and why it has been so suspect and confusing and bizarre over the years, I encourage you to take a look, do a quick Google search or deep research so you can gather the details so you are aware of what I'm going to be diving into today. I'm not going to give you a summary because I feel like that would make this video far too long. So do come in with some awareness of this crime. We are going to dive into the psychology of Amanda Knox, her boyfriend Raphael, the unrelated other convicted killer Rudy. All three were initially convicted of this crime. Later, though, Amanda and her boyfriend were acquitted. So we want to solve this whodunit crime. And that's what I want to do today, is really determine the psychology of each of the characters in this story and see who the real killer is, allegedly, of course. We already have the courts in Italy saying it's now Rudy, but for a time and for two trials in the appeals court, the regular and the appeals court, both Amanda and her boyfriend Raphael were also convicted. So let's dive into this story. There's a lot here today, and I think it's going to be a juicy and enlightening and meaningful read today. So when I pulled out the cards, I'm finding lately that I'm getting the psychology of the people today and present day. When I pull cards, I immediately get them as now. I think moving forward, I might set the intention, unless that's what Spirit wants to continue to bring through, the psychology at the time, so I can gather a little bit more detail on who they were when the conditions of the crime occurred, or whatever it is that we're talking about in each of the readings. With that said, I'm going to trust the flow of how things have gone today, and I imagine anything that needs to come up regarding the crime will do so, because that's the point. And so let's dive into Amanda's psychology. So right off the bat, we're seeing someone who's a little bit self-indulgent, sort of likes to sit back, relax, and let herself be taken care of. I think she has a high opinion of herself and might even keep to herself. There might even be some sense of aloofness here, and or disconnect, and or a lack of true connection and intimacy with people. And I think this piece specifically, when it comes to her psychology, is what made her a suspect. And I don't mean legally this made her a suspect, but I mean initially with the police and the interrogation and all the interviews thereafter, a lot of people have come to believe that Amanda Knox is the killer of her roommate Meredith Kercher in Italy. When we find out through the cards, by the way, you're going to find out who the killer is. So you know, I don't always find that out. Of course, this is alleged, but we have very clear indication today. We don't always have that. We will. We do, and we will. You will find out, so stick around. But what we're finding is she's aloof, she keeps to herself, she has a high opinion of herself. She kind of expects people to sort of be at her beck and call or meet her needs or whatever. There's no judgment here. This is just someone who carries herself well and has a high opinion of herself. However, when people have this kind of high opinion, or they hold themselves in that level of esteem, or they do have a sense of disconnect and or aloofness, that can not stain a reputation, but perception of people, public perception of people, tend not to be very well when we cannot connect to someone's warmth, when we cannot see that they're humble, that there's a sense of humility. So I think this is really what gets her in trouble in life. She might not even realize this, but and I think she does, but I don't know if she realizes that this is the piece why people tend to be put off and or have a different perception of her. I think this is the key variable of really thinking basically that she's hot shit. You know, I think that's what it is. And also what contributed to her playing such an immense role in terms of the media and the media storm that happened after this crime. She was a key player and a central figure primarily because of this element. However, this woman is a natural born leader. She's someone who is driven. She's someone who is bound and determined to be successful through any and all obstacles. So, you know, she's someone, because of that energy, because of holding herself in high esteem, because she's so opinionated, she's going to be driven and determined to surmount, to overcome any obstacle. So it's no surprise to me that she ended up being acquitted of this crime, because she really wasn't going to back down or choose otherwise. She was going to fight the good fight until she couldn't anymore. Of course, this case did reach the Supreme Court and she was acquitted, but she's not someone who's going to back down for a fight. She will do what she must to ensure not only what's right and true, but also to ensure her reputation and to ensure her own preservation, self-preservation. So here's the thing, ever since this crime, we have a card after the storm here. I don't know that she's a changed woman. I think she still holds herself in high esteem and is opinionated, driven, determined, a natural born leader, all of those things. But this has gotten to her. I mean, in a lot of ways, this has changed her life, maybe her mindset. If anything, I don't feel a sense of self-doubt, but I feel like this has plagued her. It's been something that she's carried with her for almost a huge portion of her life now. She might even want to let it go. We're not seeing that as clearly. We do see that very clearly for Raphael's read, which we'll get to. I pulled the cards. I haven't read them, but sometimes when I flip over the card, it all starts coming through right off the bat. So I got that vibe right away for Raphael. He's over it. He wants to move on. He has warmth and compassion there, and tenderness and care, but he's like, this isn't mine. You know, I didn't do this. I want to wash my hands of it. I want to move on with my life. And he feels tethered to this, almost like it defines him. As does Amanda, but it's interesting. She doesn't identify with it as much as Raphael does. I feel like, if anything, it's caused some kind of mental plague. I'm trying to think of what... I would like to connect with what specific feeling this is. Because it's not confusion. Maybe it's stress. It's just caused her a lot of pain and caused her a lot of stress and challenge over the years. I don't think it's changed her opinion of herself, again, but I don't think even her mindset has changed. It's just clouded the view, right? You know how in life, when things are going pretty well, our mind is clear, it's sharp, it's focused. And then when things are not going so well, we tend to get a little bit diluted, right? Where things are a little bit clouded, we're a little bit more tormented. We maybe can't always see clearly. And I think she has sharp vision, you know, inner vision and outer vision. Like, she knows what she's doing. And again, she can persevere, but it did affect her, and it brought her a lot of pain and stress. There's another word, there's another feeling coming up, but I'm trying to tap into the word by talking about it, but it's not coming. If it does come, I'll let you know. But more or less, she's ready to move on. What she's done is decide to focus on the light. She's decided, okay, how can I turn this, what could have been a curse and was a curse for so many years, how do I turn this into a blessing? How do I make this something that's useful for me and for others? But I think specifically for herself. This woman is a little bit self-focused and self-directed. That's her natural makeup and composition psychologically here. That's her profile. I think she was in a home where she was doted on, well seen, well heard, and she kind of has that vibe of being a princess. And so I feel like, while she's primarily concerned for herself, she does want to make use of this experience. She doesn't want to let it go to waste. She doesn't want it to all be in vain. She went through a tremendous amount of difficulty in her life. A lot of things changed for her. The course of her life changed. She was defined by this for a certain amount of time. It plagued her for many years and it became her whole life. And so she wants to make sure that it becomes something, that she makes it work for her. Just like anything, you know, if anyone were to be injured or have something that happened to them for a decade or more of their life, they're going to make use of it. And so she wants to transform this into something that ultimately does serve her and wasn't just sort of a stain on one of the short decades of her life. She's still young. So she wants to bring about some transformation as a result of what has happened to her, and she wants to be a speaker for change. I'm almost curious around what this might be, but it feels like some kind of purpose-led venture or some kind of, it's like when people decide that they're going to create some kind of contribution to humanity, like Elizabeth Smart, for example, in the kidnapping situation where she grew up to speak out against sex trafficking and so on and so forth. I feel like Amanda might do something like that, because she wants to bring about transformation and transmutation of this pain. She wants it to be alchemized. I feel like she does still have pain from this. She still has resentment. She still has bitterness. Okay, we're getting the plague now of like what it is. She does have some resentment. She does have some bitterness. She does have some lingering upset. I don't think she's precisely at this point sure of how she can heal it, aside from using it for good. You know, how can I create more justice in this world? How can I create a better world? How can I make sure this doesn't happen to other people? How can I give people a voice when they aren't given a voice or don't have a voice, or that the justice system doesn't ensure that they have a voice? I feel like there's something here around giving platform to people, maybe marginalized voices, voices that are silenced or censored. I feel like she can be a great source of empowerment for people. Now, here's the thing. Those of you who are convinced of Amanda's guilt right now are going to be furious with me and perhaps leave hate comments or whatever. Here's the thing. I have no attachment to who the killer is. I've researched well enough, or at least more on this case than I have in some of my other cases, that I explored, and you know what, I was dumbfounded. I had no idea. I was like, forget it, no idea. I'm not even going to bother giving this any thought anymore. I'd rather just read it intuitively and see what comes up there, because the mind is not going to figure out this case. It's too many variables. There's too much confusing evidence, too many hands in the pot, too much agenda, politically and otherwise. The police convinced of who it is, the Meredith's family convinced of who it is, the public being in one camp or the other. The mind isn't going to be able to figure it out, so we might as well go straight to the heart of the matter and do this intuitively. Obviously, that's what we're doing today. So for those of you who might get upset, I'm not speaking highly of Amanda. I'm speaking of factually based on intuition, what's coming through today. Her being a natural born leader, her being meant to transform this into something that becomes of benefit to herself, but also to others, in a way that she can heal and offer healing to others. So far, what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing a whole lot of guilt here, but I am seeing someone who's self-focused, who carries themselves in high esteem, and probably she wasn't very concerned, it doesn't feel like, allegedly, about the friend's murder. And it wasn't because she was the murderer so far from what we've seen. We've hardly gotten into the pot here, but it's more that she's just generally unconcerned about anyone except herself. You know what I'm saying? I hate to put it that way, but that's just the reality, and I'm being honest. And it's not that she's not concerned either. Like, of course she cares, of course she's concerned, but this wasn't going to be something that was grave and gutting for her that would dramatically change her life. This was also someone she hardly knew. She knew her for a few weeks. So it makes sense. This is an acquaintance. It's sort of like if you find out that a neighbor down the street got hurt, but you maybe waved to them a few times, welcomed them to the neighborhood, maybe saw them once every few months at a barbecue or in passing, and then you find out that they've been killed. You're gonna hurt for them, but it's not your story, it's not your experience, and so you have enough space and disconnect to have empathy, but not let it weigh you down or become something you have to actively mourn or grieve. And I feel like she was given a lot of flack for this because she wasn't behaving like a grieving mother, but she wasn't a grieving mother. You know, she was barely a friend. And so while she cared about her, there was well enough distance, and she's a person who's generally kind of cool and collected anyway and focused on herself. So that's what I'm getting so far. So what she's learned from this is she has been learning spiritually, and this is of course allegedly, but she has been learning to detach herself from public opinion, to detach herself from the perception of others, to detach herself from the need or desire for approval. It's been the journey of her lifetime, clearly the lesson of her lifetime, to learn to see herself clearly without public perception. Now this is interesting because we sort of have this narcissistic quality about her where she focuses a lot on herself, and yet she's so highly concerned about public opinion. But I also tend to find, right, and I think we're aware of that narcissists do, ironically, put a lot of clout and weight into other people's opinion of them. So I feel like this is deeply connected for her. And I feel like, ironically, the more that she were to humble herself, this goes for all of us, and allow herself to be more vulnerable and connect with others and soften her defenses and stuff like that, she would find more connection with others and deeper intimacy. And she would find that she's not as concerned for herself. She would find greater compassion and care the more vulnerable that she chose or would choose to be. So she's learning a journey here of really separating herself, and there might even be a soul contract in this. I'm not feeling that as deeply as I have in other readings, but I am feeling the energy around she might have. It's hard for me sometimes. My human mind wants to get in the way. But what wants to come through, whether I agree with it or not, because I don't always agree with what comes through, and my ego mind, and you know what? I have to trust spirit, sure, but I also have my other self. I can hold two viewpoints at once. But she might have manifested this in some way, sort of called this into her reality for someone who was so deeply concerned with what other people thought of her. Could be because, again, she grew up in a household that continuously gave her high approval and high love. Maybe went out into the real world and saw that this wasn't always going to be the constant. And perhaps this made her self-conscious or reconsider. She continued to hold herself really high to see if other people would mirror that for her. And ultimately, she brought in this life lesson or spiritual lesson of the worst kind of experience, being convicted as an innocent person. Seemingly innocent so far, and I know some of you aren't going to want to hear that, but this is what I'm getting. she called in this lesson to really learn to untether herself from other perception, from public opinion, from the perception of others, so she could really find her own opinion of herself. And again, the more that she can sort of drop those defenses and not care so much about public approval, some of that narcissism will become available to sort of dissipating, because when she doesn't care as much, she can have greater compassion for herself, she finds greater humility, and then of course that's where we find vulnerability and connection with others. So ultimately she's been learning how to live in the world but not of the world, and not see herself through the eyes of others, and find her own clarity and opinion of herself, and maintain that truth in the face of some of the greatest adversity any human can ever face. So quite profound. Through this, she has remained a leader, will continue to be so, and she was meant to, I do believe, I don't know if this particular situation was contracted for her, if this is what she agreed to as a soul. I think there are some things Errity believes that we do agree to accomplish or experience. I don't know if this was one of them for her. I think that she knew she was going to play around with the themes of perception, self-perception, attachment to others' opinions, others' approval. But I don't think she knew as a soul what that would manifest as. And it's almost like there's a correlation between her high opinion of herself and then the polarity of the complete opposite of public outrage and adversity and hatred and vitriol directed at her. Does that make sense? It's almost like she held such a strong polarity about a high opinion of herself that then she therefore manifested the complete opposite, and now is sort of facing herself through that mirror. But it's the opposite that she's experiencing, and the more she softens this, or even soften like her opinion of herself, or like her defenses, her need to be loved, those kinds of things, the more she can soften that, or soften at least even her attachment to what other people think, she's going to find that a lot of that stuff dissipates. And again, that's where she finds greater intimacy and connection. And it's also where she discovers that she can be herself authentically. And it's almost like a lot of the other stuff isn't really necessary. So there is actually plenty more here. I could dive in very deeply to Amanda. I feel like there's a lot more that wants to come through in regards to her psychology, but I also feel like some of it's redundant, and we've already covered a lot of territory, and I want to make sure we get to everybody else. So that's what we know about Amanda. Let's talk about her boyfriend at the time, Raphael. He was a local man that she had fallen for. They hit it off very quickly, young and in love. They spent that whole week smoking marijuana, having sex, and sort of doing their thing. And at the end of that week is when Meredith, Amanda's roommate's body, was discovered, and immediately the Italian police lumped them together and assumed that they were the killers because of some of their bizarre behavior. Amanda's aloofness, her kind of uncaring nature, and being more concerned with her love at the time, and also some inconsistencies in the stories, which I just think they were young, in love, ignorant, didn't really care, and I think they did to an extent, but it's not like, you know, when you're sort of in that clouded honeymoon love phase, you're sort of in a different alternate consciousness or reality. So I do think that played a role. But let's dive into Raphael. Raphael wants a life that is not defined by this. I mean, the whole spread, excuse me while I change positions, it hurts to use my yoga mat. I like to be close to the earth. There's no other setup, but it does hurt sometimes. I feel like he's still grieving some over the loss. I think he's still in the energy of the old. I think Amanda's done some greater transmutation and healing with this. She's still on her way, but she's very clear, and again, a natural born leader, and she will overcome this. I think Raphael still struggles. He feels like he missed out on a lot. He feels like he lost out on a lot. He feels like, you know, this has been long and hard, and there really wasn't a lot to show for it. You know, I mean, the whole pile is about letting go, releasing the past, releasing public opinion of him, letting all of that go. I think he, what's the word? Regrets, but it's not regret. It's not regret about, I'm not getting anything about a crime here, by the way, you guys. So far, allegedly, I'm getting that, and not that I would ever be sued for saying someone's innocent, but, you know, I want to let you guys know this is all directly from the energy here. The facts, you know, who knows, but we do have the Italian Supreme Court agreeing with this reading so far. So I think he wants to let this go. I think he wants to meet someone. He wants to meet someone, fall in love, start a family, enjoy his life, start over, fresh start, new chapter. I think he really wants that. And yet it hasn't happened for him, or he hasn't been able to move on. I feel like he's still healing, and I think he holds himself back more than he has to, because he's also attached to that public perception, and who wouldn't be? But I think he holds himself back from connection, from romance, from relationships, which is what he genuinely wants. He also wants to move on. He wants to experience sort of a new frontier, new horizon in his life, but he assumes the worst. He assumes that everyone's going to know him as Raphael, the killer. He thinks that the public thinks so badly of him that he doesn't know who to trust or what they would think, or if he should even bother. Is he going to scare people just by approaching them and saying hello? So he doesn't know how to start his new life. He's still sort of pondering over the past, what happened, why it happened that way. He's being called to let go and or working through the process of letting go so he can fully move on, release the past, and release that public perception of him, but him releasing his emotional investment in that, so he's not so affected by it. He wants to move on. He wants to experience something new. I feel like he might even still be in love with Amanda, to be completely honest. I feel like he perhaps feels like they were meant to be, or could have been meant to be, and yet it fell apart because of this whole fiasco. So he feels a little bit wronged in that way. But I definitely think Raphael's still through the process of healing, yearning for a new beginning, not quite having found it yet, but definitely wants some kind of relationship fulfillment in his life. We'll have to look and see if he's had relationships. I'm not sure, but it's a very clear relationship card here, that's what he's seeking, and he would be truly fulfilled and happy if he got to have that. And I feel like he's been maybe even longing for that since the experience with Amanda. Maybe he had been lonely or lived sort of a lonely life prior to that or after. And so that's what he's seeking, and he wants to let all this go, and yet he's still sort of in it. So that's Raphael. I don't have a whole lot on him because there's not a lot that's coming through. I feel like he's also still moving through it, and all the cards are fairly redundant. They're about letting go, releasing allegiances, finding new partnership or emotional fulfillment, and moving on. Now, we're getting to Rudy, you guys. Now, this is the convicted killer based on the Italian court system. This is also the third of the group of convicted killers in the beginning when all three suspects were initially arrested. They believed this was a group crime, a group sex crime, and they believed that it was all three involved together. What this reading is saying, and very clearly so, is that Rudy is the single solo killer. We're going to get into a little bit here. We not only have the death tarot card, if that's not obvious, I don't know what is in his reading, but we also have burden and fighting. So let me show you some of these cards. Death, burden. He carries this burden, but it's not directly about that here. So let's talk about Rudy. So I feel like Rudy, and I've talked a little bit about this, I got this insight when I was reading Ted Bundy. If you haven't checked out the reading, feel free to check that out. I feel like he has an inner drive that maybe hadn't yet been acknowledged or acted upon prior to this crime. I'm getting really intense feelings, so I'm just working through that. I don't want to say a sense of evil, although it could be. What's that energy? Definitely deviance. But there's this energy of an impulse or a drive that hadn't yet been acted upon prior to this crime. But it was the perfect opportunity to act on it this time. Just so happens the conditions lined up, he was able to do it. It was a crime of opportunity. That's what I'm getting. We're going to dive in a little bit more here, but it was a crime of opportunity. Now, what I'm feeling in these cards, but what I also know, so I'm kind of connecting the dots as we go, and it is a little bit of an exercise for my cognitive skills because I'm getting the downloads, we'll call them. That's not really how I experience it, but I'm also remembering the information that I've read. So there is a history of crime here. I feel like there was, if people were to go back and look, I encourage viewers, if you guys are a fan of this kind of thing, or this case in particular, and you have that kind of armchair detective skill set, I encourage you to go dive into this crime because I feel like Rudy had a history of crime. This is something I don't know, so if you could research it, but there's a way to research it, but I know this is all over in Europe, so we might not be able to access this information. If you're an American, you might not know how. Perhaps worldwide viewers, if we reach any of those. I feel like he was someone whose crimes were increasing Maybe in frequency, but I'm feeling more in intensity. So maybe one time he burglarized and he got a Coke, you know, I mean, this is a really random example. And then the next time it was a watch. And then the next time it was a diamond ring. And then the next time he might have, you know, been a voyeur, you know, then the next time he lifted up a woman's dress, and the next time, right? So I don't think it would be progressive and that specific. This is an example so you guys can see what I mean, the energy that I'm talking about. I feel like that this drive within him started with probably simpler, more neutral things that he did, and then it got bigger and more amplified as he went, because the drive was always going to bring him to something bigger. You know, he was waiting for the opportunity and learning to trust himself and learning how to kind of go through this. Now, as I'm saying that though, I get the energy of a crime of passion. So what I'm feeling is crime of opportunity. What I mean by that is that he had this opportunity. I'm like deciding how I can describe this, because I'm getting both energies. And so maybe some of you guys knowing the facts of the case or knowing facts about him, this would make sense to you. But it's like, okay, this is a great opportunity for me to, like, whatever it is he's seeking, whatever that drive is seeking inside of him, to get that need met. But I also feel like it becomes maybe something bigger than he expected, and or becomes more emotional than he would have intended, because it also feels like a heat of the moment kind of thing at the same time. But I also feel like he was well aware of what he's doing. So it's interesting. Let's see what else. Yeah, again, he was sort of burdened by this drive, and I don't know. And by burdened, like any of us, if we have some kind of addiction, soft or hard addiction or compulsion, it's something that lives inside of us, and it can be hard to control. And I'm not giving any kind of excuse at all. I'm just sharing, you know, the description here. This is something that he carried with him that burdened him. And I feel like there was a drive toward, we could call crime, right? But toward deviant behavior. But I do feel like he could keep it in check to a degree. And I feel like, though, he was a ticking time bomb, though. So it's like someone who could keep it in check and someone who might be more methodical. I don't see him as super methodical, though. I just see him as maybe intentional and kind of being smart about what he was willing to do or wouldn't do. And yet he was still a ticking time bomb on the inside. So I know it's kind of sounding conflicting, but I think it all comes together. So here we have what I think is the picture of our killer. Now, I know this is a card, but if this doesn't tell you everything, I don't know what does. Now take a look at what's in the background here. We see someone strangling someone. I've never noticed that in this card. Never. I've read and used this so many times. We have a fight that ensued. I feel like this could represent him fighting himself with this in the moment. Do I do it or do I not? But I also think there was like not even a flinch. It was like this knee-jerk reaction that happened. But I feel like more or less the cards here are telling us that he's the killer. I'm gonna take a look. We see a woman here who's battered and bruised as well. And I think this also represents maybe some of his regret or remorse. Now, I don't know, I can't say necessarily it's remorse. It's more of the energy of fighting himself. And maybe it's because of where it has put him now, where he's put behind bars. But here's the thing. He's now been released. So we have a killer who has now been released. Hopefully he has been rehabilitated. But he fights himself on this, or fought himself then even. I did ask whether he committed, it was very clear to me when I put the cards out that he was the killer with death. With the card of fighting there and the choking and all of that, and the burden card, I knew he was the killer. So I said, did he act alone? We get the rebel. I feel like he very much acted alone. And I feel like he waited for the opportunity. I feel like he knew she was going to be alone. He waited for her to be alone. And here's the thing. Maybe it was like the crime of opportunity, then a passion. And I feel like it's coming together in this way. He saw the opportunity to connect with her and be intimate with her. That might have been the opportunity that then became rape. In the heat of the moment, it became murder. So I feel like that was the timeline and the progression of this crime. It was something where this person has a drive within them. They meet someone, they hit it off. They see that she's alone. And we get later on, we might even go over to it right now, where the progression of the crime. How did this happen? What happened that night? I think he came over for a visit. She let him in. They were friendly with each other. And then at that point, allegedly, we don't know for sure, but allegedly, based on what I'm getting here in terms of like opportunity and then heat of the moment, where he might have made a pass at her or a move, and maybe she was willing, but then she wasn't, and or she just let him in as a friend. She wasn't expecting to sleep with him or do anything of that nature. She was just letting him in as a friend. Oh, hey, how's it going? How are you? And then kind of like, okay, I'm going to bed, because we get the energy later. She was coming home. It was a kind of an unusual night. She came home early. She was tired. She wanted to go to bed. She feels like Meredith, the victim of this crime, feels like she was someone who did like her time. Whether or not she was an introvert, I don't know, but she might have been the type of person who would like have a tea and read a book before bed, but kind of like that time to herself. We do have her making a phone call here as well, so she might have been settling in for the night, and she gets this person knocking at the door, and she's like, huh, this is interesting. But this could also go this way. She might have called him, or he might have called her, where he says, hey, you know, are you busy? Can I come over? And she's like, oh, sure. But I also feel some reluctance too, in terms of like, she was ready to go to bed. She's tired. She wasn't planning on staying up all night, but she does know him, and she lets him in. And then suddenly she was taken hold or taken by surprise. So that's the energy that we have here. Is there anything else that wants to come through here? Yeah, you know, she made a phone call, or he made a phone call to her. She didn't know it was going to come with a price. She didn't know it was going to come with a price. He came over, she let him in, and then got caught in the sort of spider's web. What's the term? Kind of got caught when you're kind of held up in something and you didn't expect it. And of course that led to the loss of her life. So talked about Rudy being the alleged killer. Some of you are going to be pleased with that based on your research. Some of you are going to hate that. It is showing he did this alone, and it was a crime of opportunity, meaning he knew she was alone. He wouldn't have done it if she wasn't alone. So that's what's interesting. I'm very much getting the energy that a quiet, peaceful night. It was the opportunity piece, because no other roommates were there. Now, I don't know if he walked in there with the clear awareness of, I'm going to kill her, because we do have that heat of the moment. But I think he knew he was up to no good. I think he was, again, even battling himself there of, you know, is this a good idea? But, oh yes, it is. And this is the moment I've been waiting for. But that could also be him just wanting to be intimate with her. So let's see what else is here. I'm trying to even remember what my other card pulls were. Give me a moment. So obviously we got, I think, a very clear answer so far on Rudy. And allegedly he's the killer. But then I also asked, because of course I had all these flipped over, and then I had to put them up face first so I could read them. But when I first pull them out so that I don't get confused and start getting a bunch of messages right away, I put them face down. And so I said, well, who done it? You know, who is the killer? So this is what we're looking at. This is someone who it looks like was a friend, or someone that was seemingly trustworthy but was wearing a mask. So someone who actually could not be trusted. Take a look. Someone who put on a good face, seemed friendly, maybe even, you know, seemed trustworthy. They might have had some interactions, communication and exchanges that was friendly. He seemed trustworthy, but he was actually a snake. Behind those masks, he was a snake. I feel like this was an acquaintance or a friendly connection, friendship, you know, even a neighbor. And I think we even know that he was a neighbor, at least lived locally in the area. But it feels like not quite acquaintance, but not quite friend. Someone who you kind of know a little bit, like a neighbor, where you see them well enough, where you have a decent idea of them, but maybe don't know everything. Let's see what else here. We have someone, I feel like, who was seeking some kind of something. So, you know, now that we basically know that Rudy was allegedly the killer, you know, we can kind of connect these dots here. But he was seeking for something. He was seeking for some kind of fulfillment, and he was hoping to get it from her. We know now that was some level of intimacy, and then it led to a heat of the moment kind of killing. But I also feel like it was something that he would have done eventually anyway. And that's why I say, you know, it's in him already, but he took advantage of the moment too, because if he didn't kill her, I feel like at some other point in his life he would have done the same. I also feel like he felt like this was owed to him, or it was like, no, I get to have this. Like, whether or not you're going to give it to me, I get to have this. And when maybe she wasn't willing to give, he decided to make sure of it. And I think that drive in and of itself just sort of took over, and maybe he lost control, which led to the killing. So let's see what else here. The killer. So the killer is someone, I mean, we even have someone who could be considered a burglar here, you guys, and Rudy has a history of burglary. Now, the one thing I did was asking you guys to look up was, did he have a history of crimes that were increasing in not amplitude, but magnitude, where it gets more and more intense. But I mean, we even have a burglar card here that could be considered a burglar card. I also feel like there's more here. Let me see what else. I'm gonna meditate with these cards. Give me a moment. So a couple other elements here around who's the killer. Take a look at this card. How I'm seeing this is, the public perception, at least for a while, if not now, was, is it Raphael? Is it Amanda? Amanda and Raphael, what are they doing, right? We're so busy looking at apples and oranges that we don't see what's right in front of us. She's looking at the real killer right here. And who is that? It's clarified by the burglar card. It's the one not only who has a history of burglary, or a history of thievery or crime, but it's also the one who had something to gain, who was set to benefit from killing this person. So that's the question we can ask. Who was set to benefit? He might have even stolen something from her, or a few things. It might have been little things, because we were told that he did not steal anything, but I feel like he might have. Or he had been to her room before and stolen things. I think maybe he had some kind of preoccupation with her. Not that he was obsessed. I don't sense like a lot of voyeurism and him hanging outside and stalking outside and all that stuff. But I do get a sense that he had kind of walked by the window before, waited for people to be gone. And again, this night, he saw that everyone was gone, or knew the conditions, knew that everyone was going to be gone, and kind of played it super cool, either knocked on the door or gave her a call, was welcomed in. And I feel like he knew there was a chance that he might take this to the next level, but I don't know if he completely foresaw that he would be killing that evening. But he did know he was going in there for a reason, and it was for that fulfillment of his desire, of his needs, of that drive. And I think this is telling us we were looking at apples and oranges when the killer was always right in front of us, right under our nose, and it was the burglar. What else do we have here? Who was the killer? Yeah, again, it was the person who was set to benefit from this crime. This was someone who, whose passion or desire was out of control and was set to benefit from this. I think there's more here, but it's not coming through. So what I'm going to do is take a few moments, meditate with the final cards, any final messages, and I will be right back. All right, so the last part of the reading, we're going to be talking about finishing up what happened that night. I know I already pulled on that, but then I felt like it wasn't as clear, and so we talked a little bit about that. She had come home, maybe a little bit more tired than usual, had made a call, received a call, maybe answered the door, and then was caught up in something that she couldn't have foreseen. So what I'm getting here, I wanted to be more succinct, I guess, and I really wanted to be like, give me what happened to Meredith. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bang, right? And so basically we have here, she was following her normal routine, her bedtime routine. We already saw that earlier, but was following her usual routine to get ready for bed and to go to sleep. So it doesn't even look like she was looking to like party or do the thing or hang out or any of that. It looks like she was getting ready for bed and doing whatever she would normally do, when something sort of came out of left field or was sort of like a curveball for her. And what I'm also seeing here is that Rudy may or may not have, but it feels relevant. I feel like he feels like he was owed something. Now, I don't know if he was feeling like he was owed something from her, or if he felt like he was owed something just in general, like in life, like I deserve this, I want this. But again, remember, he's seeking some kind of fulfillment, and he's wanting this, and he's thinking it's going to come from her, and or it must come from her. So maybe this is something where he wanted to finish what he started. I do believe that they had some kind of connection. Again, I know he was some kind of neighbor or local, or they had encountered each other. Again, some kind of acquaintance, a little bit more than acquaintance, a little bit less than a friend. Didn't we say something like that? But anyway, he felt like he was owed something, like, okay, well, I want to finish what was started. And I don't think she was having anything to do with that. I don't think she was in the mood for that. I don't think she was expecting that. I don't think she was foreseeing that. Again, he might have called, and maybe he was thinking, oh, okay, shit's going down tonight, like something's going down, like this is what's up. She's thinking, oh, I'm just going to bed, and he's stopping by. Okay, whether it was a call or he showed up, I think she was very much in her own zone, her own element, having her own plans, and had no intention to be fulfilling whatever it is he thought was going to happen. Nor did she think or expect, based on from what's here, that they would be finishing anything that he started. I think they both had very different mindsets as to what the night was going to entail, and I think passion got the best of him, lust, desire, this drive, and that's what led to the crime. Now, we even have this. We have a series of events that led to this. Like I said, this reading has been very direct and very specific, even more so than we have the Ten of Swords. I mean, take a look at the picture. We know that Meredith was stabbed. We have the Ten of Swords. We have something that started out with lust but became out of control. But I feel like his drive in general, that lust kind of feeling, was something that was out of control. Maybe even something that he can't control. And again, we saw him sort of trying to in the past, and sort of kind of, what is the word, teetering it? How do you pronounce that? Where it's like you kind of keep a lid on it and let a little bit more out, keep a lid on it, let a little bit more out. And I feel like he was doing that for a time. And again, we saw there was opportunity, but then also passion, heat of the moment, where he lost control, and it led to this. Was it because she was refusing and he felt like he was getting angry? Again, he felt like he was owed this. He felt like this is going to happen and this is what's going down. And when it feels like she was like, no, or that's not at all what I was thinking, or whatever, I don't think he was going to take no for an answer. And I think whatever happened from there is what led to the death. Now, I do want to pull we have intention. This is what he wants. This is what he's seeking. Four of Wands. I feel like he was seeking some kind of fulfillment, seeing like some kind of matrimony happening here, not an actual marriage, but he's sitting here thinking kind of, oh, this is going to work out, right? And then we have the Knight of Swords, where he's like going in hard. He's going in for what he wants. And that's not at all what she was vibing with. But I wanted to ask, when did it change from intimacy to murder or homicide? Can you tell us when or how did it change from rape to murder? Let me see. How did it change, or how did it change from rape to murder? Let's see if we can get a card from Spirit. 1 second. Okay, so what I'm getting, and I'm not getting a perfect vibe on this, so it's like I'm giving the context, but I'm not getting the direct hit that I would like. But since I'm not getting it, I'll share what I'm getting so far. I feel like he just got caught up. He got caught up in the moment. He got caught up in that drive. He got caught up in, he couldn't see straight. You know how some people see red and then there they go, they're off? It's kind of like that, where he already thought he was going to get something out of the deal. It doesn't feel like she had any attention. While it was somewhat forethought, I again feel like he had some idea this might go down. I don't know that he was 100% convinced it would end in murder, but then when she wasn't willing, and or maybe she screamed and he was trying to quiet her, he was going to make this happen again. He wasn't going to take no for an answer, and I think he was angry. I think he was angry because he felt like he was owed, he felt entitled, and you know, how dare you say no to me, and you're going to finish what you started, and that kind of attitude. Let me see if there's anything else here. You know, you don't get to say no to me. I feel like there's an entitlement here. There's a drive here. I don't think he was seeing straight or seeing clearly. You know, he was in the heat of the moment, and again, he was going to have it no matter what, and made sure of that one way or the other. See if there's anything else. I think that's all I'm getting, and so I'll go ahead and end the reading here. I am curious to see how everyone's going to respond to this. Again, I know some people are all pro Amanda, some people are totally anti Amanda. I did all the research and I have no clue. Like, when I looked at it mentally, I could not assess it or get a clear picture because the evidence is all over the place. I think we got a clear psychological profile of each of the players in this case, and that it was very much clearly, but allegedly, Rudy as the killer, the soul killer, soul as an S-O-L-E, someone who had a history of what was going to become violence, if not already violent crimes. This was a crime of opportunity. He saw that it was an opportunity where she would be alone, and I think that's one of the reasons he sought her out. He knew they had some semblance enough of a relationship for her to at least open the door or answer his call. And from there, he went for it. I don't feel like he broke in, because it feels like she took a call and then she met him at the door and let him in. But it could have been a situation where then he barged in and was like, you know, we're going to do this. But he did, it looks like, give her some kind of proactive or heads up notice, where she was sort of willing and available and receptive, but it immediately went to something else. She was caught up in something, tangled up very quickly in something that she wasn't going to get out of. But again, I think he acted alone, and I think he's the killer, and that they convicted the right person ultimately. So again, if you like this video, if you enjoy this kind of reading or this channel, I encourage you to like, subscribe, press the bell icon. That way you receive notifications anytime a new reading pops up. If you want to get to know more about me and my day job and even personal readings, you can go to erritygreen.com/shop, or you can check out the link below. I do have 2 other YouTube channels if you're into this kind of thing. Not quite psychic true crime, you know, a little bit more spiritual than that, but Wise Woman Oracle and Tarot, and then Wise Women Television. Both of those 2 are linked below. All right, thank you all, and I'll see you next time.